So it's a glorious, bright day today. It's one of those kind of like bright, wintry days with a bit of wind, you know, sort of like you can feel spring is coming, but it ain't quite here yet. So it's the perfect day to pick up my trail around the churches of the City of London. I think this is the 4th video in the series, and the others have been crackers. What they have for me, whether they were for you or not, I don't know. And maybe behind me, you can see the first one that we're going to do today, St Andrew Holborn. St Andrew stands on the site of a wooden Saxon church built on a hill overlooking the River Fleet and mentioned in a charter of 951 as the old wooden church. This was replaced by a stone church in the 1400s which survived the Great Fire but was rebuilt by Sir Christopher Wren in 1687. One thing I'll address right at the very start, before we've even really covered the first church, is that we're very unlikely to go inside any of the churches. Now, on previous videos, people have always gone, why didn't you go inside more of the churches? Obviously, if the churches were open, I would go inside them. So if you look back through the previous videos, I have gone inside the churches that have been open. The only thing is most of them are only open for services and special occasions. So sadly, unless I'm here on a Sunday morning, or some of them have a service maybe on like a Friday lunchtime, something like that, then they're closed. There's a couple that are open more often than that, and they're open, but generally speaking, these churches are not open to the public 90% of the time, in my experience. Now, if you go in the comments, you might find people contradicting me with that, and that would be really useful information if they're telling you when the churches are open. But just a little note, not to expect too much in that respect. But it so happens that the first one we come to, St Andrew Holborn, is open. So maybe that is a good omen for the rest of the day. Now it looks like there's a performance going on, so I don't think I can film in there. But I'm going to go inside. That is such a beautiful space in there. I could have stayed in there and watched all of that recital. I think it was actually a rehearsal, to be honest with you. I'm not entirely sure the guests were particularly welcome, but no one told me to leave, and it was really beautiful. We've progressed down here, down Shoe Lane, and there's a degree to which the churches are really just a device for a walk around the city. So there's no churches in Shoe Lane that we're going to visit, but I just love Shoe Lane. These bollards indicate that you are now entering the City of London. Just to recap the essential information, before the Great Fire of London, there were 108 City of London churches, 109 if you include St Paul's Cathedral. Today, just 39 of those churches remain in their entire state, in their entire form. There are a number where there's just the tower or just the churchyard, but if you're looking for actual churches, it's only 39 of those original 109. I think that must include St Paul's Cathedral. So far in the previous videos, I've walked around 18 of those. The Great Fire of London destroyed 34 of those churches that were never rebuilt, and a number of the remaining churches were rebuilt after the Great Fire of London by, mostly, not exclusively, by Sir Christopher Wren. And then in the 1860s, there was a kind of reorganisation of the parishes of the City of London, and that got rid of a bunch of other churches, and they're mostly just represented by like plaques on the wall, and we've seen some of those in previous videos. And then of course the other great event in the lifespan of the City of London churches was the Blitz, of course, during the Second World War, which destroyed a number of other churches. Again, there are towers that remain. Some of the churches were restored and rebuilt. So it's a really mixed picture, but of course all of those 109 sites have some type of legacy. They leave some mark in the city, whether it's a physical mark or not. And so when we do these walks around the City of London, really we're being guided by the the physical remains of these churches, by the spirits of these churches, and really by the fabric of the city as a whole. And I feel like like I say, the church is really just a device to guide us on a fascinating walk. Do you know what? So just walking past, I think this is the most like City of London bollards I've seen in one place. They're really making a point here, aren't they? But you're in the City of London now, because I guess we're right on the border. And I've plotted out a route today that kind of takes in 11 of the churches. So I think it's incredibly unlikely we'll do all 11 churches, but we'll certainly give it a go. But actually the most important place I want to go is actually not one of the churches, it's the remains of one of the churches. And I think this is one of the most special locations in the whole of the City of London. So we're going to go down Farringdon Road, just a short distance. Of course, we've got the River Fleet flowing beneath our feet, and I have a video about the River Fleet walk, which I'll link to below. And this is the kind of thing you find in the city all over the place. Look, so it says here, this modern building here is on the site of the Congregational Memorial Hall and Library, which was erected to commemorate the fidelity to conscience shown by the ejected ministers of 1662. And stone was laid by John Remington Mills, Esquire, in 1872. And then above it we have another plaque, basically to commemorate the rebuilding of the Congregational Memorial Hall. This stone was laid by Fred Reisman, Chairman, Bernard Honus, Secretary, 5th of September 1972. And then above it, we need another plaque, obviously. And this one is a plaque raised by the Greater London Council, the GLC, the site of the Congregational Memorial Hall. The Labour Party was founded here in 1900, on the 27th of February 1900. I never knew about the Congregational Memorial Hall. There you go. It's now obviously long gone. So just on the other side of Ludgate Circus over there was where our Fleet Street walk ended, and that was nominally a kind of City of London churches walk, although it turned into much more than that. But we went to 2 or 3 incredible churches, didn't we? So now we're going to carry on up Ludgate Hill, which was my intention that day. Of course, Ludgate Hill, named after King Lud, one of the legendary founders of the City of London, we talked about that in the Fleet Street video, didn't we? And this is where there would have been one of the gates in the old Roman city, in the Roman wall that went around the City of London. And again, I've walked the route of that wall, and I'll link to that below. You all right, mate?
Yeah, I watch you all the time.
Oh, right, I'm just filming one now, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Where are you walking?
I was just, let's cross the road and get a bit of light. I was just starting my piece to camera there, and this fellow walked past. He pointed, watching some of the videos, a lovely chap called David, who was doing an absolutely stonking walk today. He's walked from Whitechapel, he's crossed the river, been to Borough, he's going through the city now, and then he's going to follow the River Fleet all the way up to Hampstead. I think he's taking in a few hostelries along the way, sampling the beer. But lovely to meet you, David. We just had a great chat about oldest pubs in London and everything. David said the Seven Stars is the oldest pub in London. You heard it here via David. I don't have an opinion on this. I just genuinely don't know. I'm going to say now, this is not what I intended to talk about. There's significantly more people around than there was when I last walked through the city. I mean, a lot more people. You can tell, just look around me. The city's usually really quiet at the weekend, and there's loads of people. So it's walking up Ludgate Hill is a really good time to get a sense of the idea of the City of London being a city of twin hills, the twin hills of the City of London. The western one being this one, Ludgate Hill, and the eastern one being Cornhill, divided by the River Walbrook, which creates the valley that produces these two wonderful hills here. And then you have all the other hills that drop down to the River Thames. It's a really magical landscape. Here we have St Martin's Church, Ludgate, which was rebuilt by Sir Christopher Wren after the Great Fire of London. We're going to have to cross the road to get a decent view of it. So John Betjeman, in his essential guidebook that I use for all of my city walks, my City of London churches walks, I should say, he talks about how the spire was very carefully positioned to be visible from just above the rooftops, but also its alignment to St Paul's Cathedral, the dome of St Paul's Cathedral, which is just here, further up Ludgate Hill. And for the record, I think we're going to avoid St Paul's Cathedral and maybe just do that right at the very end. Is it a church? Is a cathedral a church, or is a cathedral a cathedral? That's the question. And in the wall of St Martin, you can see that this is where Ludgate was. The Ludgate demolished in 1760. So actually, in the biggest sort of scale of things, not that long ago, really. Well, we're going to go down Creed Lane to our next church, but it looks like they're digging up the entire road here. I wonder what they're doing. I wonder what incredible archaeological discoveries they will find. I'm just Googling Creed Lane actually to find some information about it. And funny I should mention archaeological discoveries, because one of the things you get is a British Museum listing of objects found here. There seems to be a number of Romano-British objects that have been found in Creed Lane, mostly sort of bowls, domestic stuff. So obviously being within the Roman city walls, it would have been inhabited. Oh, fantastic. I love all these little laneways here that you get coming off of Ludgate Hill, just beneath St Paul's. They really capture the old sense of London. I don't mean the deep, deep past of London, but the time when people lived in the city. And one of the big changes now is the amount of tourists in the city of London. And that's a change within the last 10 years. This is St Andrew Hill. And this is Wardrobe Place. I love it in here. From memory, the name comes from the location of the king's wardrobe, literally the location of the monarch's clothes, where his clothes were kept. Of course, they had an enormous, elaborate wardrobe, a little bit like Lady Gaga's, I would have thought. And here we go, site of the king's wardrobe, destroyed in the Great Fire of 1666. So we'll go down here, down Adel Hill. So we went down St Andrew's Hill on the Roman Wall walk, which was end of 2020. So I don't know if I've been down here before, actually. The city is full of these little surprises, aren't they? Look here, we have former site of the Faraday building, City Central, long distance and international telephone exchanges, 1902 to 1982. Now, I think I've accidentally stumbled upon one of the great locations in Patrick Keeler's seminal film London, and I was just thinking about it actually, because part of the thesis of that film, which I massively recommend, the character Robinson in the film, who we never see but we hear reported about, he's got this idea about London not having the kind of continental life of European cities. And then they use this shot here. I think it's where he says he finally found a location which evoked that feeling of a European sort of, classic continental city life. And I believe it's this shot here, this scene, this street. I think that's the back of St Andrews, which gives its name St Andrew's Hill. I have the book at home actually, which has the locations in it, so I can check, but I'm pretty sure this is it. And it's a location that used to flummox people actually. There was always a question of, where, that's all right, carry on guys, it's all right. There's always a question of, where is this place? And I'm pretty sure this is the shot. That's an embarrassingly bad précis of the animating thesis of Patrick Keeler's film London, a film which I love. But I was fortunate enough to interview Patrick for my blog. It was a text interview when the film London was released in book form, not that long ago, about a year ago. And so we talk about some of those things in that interview. And also I walked the first walk from the film. And I'll link to that below. There's this little alleyway here and the back of St Andrews. I'm guessing it's St Andrews. It actually might be the church we've come to visit. So actually St Andrews by the Wardrobe is our next church. I was a bit confused because I did include it on my Roman wall walk. It's where it ended. This is a magnificent building, isn't it? And the location is fantastic. Sat right on Queen Victoria Street. Let's see what Sir John Betjeman has to say about St Andrew by the Wardrobe. So it's 1685 to 1695, and He's actually quite sniffy about some churches, particularly if they've had restoration work done, and he often sort of critiques the restoration work and how well it's been done. But he says the church was completely gutted in 1940 and entirely renewed inside by Marshal Sisson. This is a Wren church, by the way. The aisles are shut in and there is consequently an overwhelming effect of light, new woodwork. There are galleries all round and a screen below the west gallery. The side chapel on the south side is used for weekday services. The ceiling of the whole church is very attractive. I very much doubt we're going to get inside to see that attractive ceiling. Over the aisles it has quadripartite vaulting, and over the nave it is barrel roofed and decorated with charming rough Renaissance plasterwork in the form of wreaths of fruit and flowers and semicircles and spandrels of cherubs. Spandrels, my God, that's a word I'm going to have to start using. Spandrels. The British and Foreign Bible Society uses the north aisle. Not amazing stories connected to this church. But even so, it's good. So maybe this was a new church built by Wren in 1685. Maybe this isn't the sort of remains of a medieval church. Let's go and explore further. This is turning into a really convivial afternoon. It's lovely to meet Chris back there, who's taken a stroll around the city of London with his mate. Lovely to meet you, Chris, and thanks for watching the videos. I hope you're watching this one now. So our next location takes us a little bit up Queen Victoria Street, then over down towards the river. I'm loving this walk, by the way. I'm really enjoying it. So I've come up onto this sort of terrace here, but I think it's called Baynard House. It's a really strange place. I've been here a few times before. I've brought people here on little walks, say brought people, like mates, and we do a little city stroll in the evenings. It's a really curious location. So over here you've got this strange monolithic block. I don't know what it's doing. I think it might be where there's plant related to this building here. I'm not even sure what this building is. And then you've got this statue, which I believe represents the 7 ages of man. And then next to it, they used to have, quite incredibly, part of the Roman Temple of Mithras, which has now been placed back in its original location. And they've built a whole experience around it, the London Mithraeum. But there was something, part of it here. I can't remember the relationship between the Mithraeum and this particular site. It was a very just peculiar place. And quite unexpectedly, here is our next church, St Benet's. And actually, when we were walking the Moselle, the second half of the Moselle the other week, that's when we came across a St Benet's in Tottenham that was funded from the rebuilding of this church. Money was donated at the time, money was raised for this to build another church elsewhere where people needed it. So it connects those two walks really nicely, doesn't it? This is another Wren church. And Sir John Betjeman tells us that it's also known as the Welsh Church. It's where services are held in Welsh once a week. It's linked to the church in Wales. And we can see some Welsh on the signboard here. So stood here in front of the Welsh Church in London makes me feel like now I absolutely have to go to that very special location I mentioned at the start of the walk, which I was going to end the walk with. And I feel like it has to follow this church, although there are a couple of other churches I was planning on visiting between here and there, which I could just film them and then stick them afterwards, but I thought that'd be false. So what I'm going to do is going to miss those out and keep them for another day and go straight to the final location. I feel like narratively it's just too perfect. So it's almost like I want to go cut. So I think this special location where we will end our walk is just up here in Salters Hall Court, surrounded by these modern buildings. It tells you a lot about the sacredness of this site that has been left untouched by development. And then we're at the next place. So this beautiful little garden here is the St Swithun's Memorial Garden. It's the remains of St Swithun's Church, but it's dedicated to the memory of Catrin Glyndwr. Now I know the Welsh people think I've pronounced that horribly. I don't know if it's Glyndwr or Gwyndir. So Catrin Glyndwr, sorry for pronouncing that wrong to my Welsh friends here. She was the daughter of the legendary Welsh leader Owen Glyndwr, who was believed to have magical powers, to have the power of enchantment. And the English actually were quite scared of him, and he was always rising up against English rule. But Catrin was married to a guy called Sir Edmund Mortimer, who also led an uprising against the king. And so Catrin and her two children were taken prisoner and incarcerated in the Tower of London. It's believed because her children would have had a claim on the throne. And they were held hostage there for 4 years in the Tower of London, which was a legendarily brutal place to be held prisoner. And then 4 years later, Catrin and her two children were found dead. It's not recorded exactly how they died, but you can assume, I think, that they were murdered. So this memorial garden here is not only to Catrin and her two children, but to all women and children who suffer in war, which is very poignant to think about at the moment as that's going on as we speak. And Catrin and her two children were buried in St Swithun's churchyard, which was here, or somewhere near here anyway, and it's not really known why she was buried here. Some people subsequently believed that it had something to do with the relationship with the London Stone, the legendary London Stone, which many people, most notably William Blake, believed was associated with Druidism. It was a standing stone that had been here for as long as people could remember. I covered this in one of my city walks. I can't remember which one. It was probably the Roman Wall Walk or one of the city churches walk. I think it was the first city churches walk, actually. So those people associate the burial of Catrin here with her links to Owen Glyndwr and his magical powers, that she had to be buried near to this ancient source of magic and power, which is an intriguing thought, isn't it? And you can see why I wanted to put this at the end, because it's very difficult to follow that, really. It's a really powerful, quite emotional place, actually. And I stumbled upon it like by accident, really. One night when I was walking up Queen Victoria Street, went to the statue, the Seven Ages of Man and remnants of the Temple of Mithras, and then came here. And this is, for me, this is one of the most sort of powerful places in the City of London, a really, really special place. So thank you for joining me on yet another fantastic City of London churches walk. I love these walks so much. We only visited 4 of the churches that I had plotted out, 4 of the 11. I knew that was overambitious, but it was just, sometimes it's about quality rather than quantity, isn't it? I don't want to rush this. And on the next tour we'll get the Guildhall, because there's all the places in between as well that you get to visit. So it's as much about other places as it is about the churches themselves, isn't it? So thank you again, and we're going to keep doing these. That's what, 22 now we've done of the 38 churches. So we've got 16 to go. So I predict that will be probably, what, another 3 videos? And we'll do St Paul's at the end. St Paul's will be the conclusion to the series. So now I can see this running through the year, actually. Take care, have a great week, and as I always like to say, I look forward to seeing you on the next walk, wherever that may be. And if you've got any particular requests, pop them down below. Love to hear your thoughts.